Today's the 4th day of this December 1982 7-day retreat. And the Koan today will be one taken from the Blue Cliff record, as read from a book by Sekida called Two Zen Classics, even though we do substitute some words here and there from other translations. And the title of the Koan is Nansen, this flower. In listening to a talk, can there be listening without any walls? There are walls here around this room, divider in the back. But beyond the walls there's the grass, the meadow, the trees, and there's the lake and the mountains. And this enormous sky. Everything is open. Can listening be like that without any enclosure? In the introduction to this koan, just read one sentence of it. It says, when the action of the mind is stopped and swept away, the iron tree blooms. Actually it says will bloom, but we'll leave that tense out, because these things never happen in the future. Either they happen or they don't. Iron tree blooms. Which, if you think of you, is absolutely impossible. How can iron bloom? How can there be a tree out of iron? And yet, this is how one often feels. Out of iron or stone, some sort of dull material. How can it bloom? You don't know. This is how the Koan reads, the main subject. Riku Taifu, who was governor of the province, while talking with Nansen, who was a Zen teacher, said, and now he quotes someone else, so-and-so said, heaven and earth and I are of the same root. Heaven and earth and I are of the same root. All things and I are of one substance. Isn't this absolutely fantastic? Another translation says, isn't it quite marvelous? Heaven and earth and I are of the same root. All things and I are of one substance. Isn't this fantastic? Nansen pointed to a flower in the garden, called the governor to him and said, people of these days see this flower as though they were in a dream. And the poem reads, hearing, seeing, touching, and knowing are not separate and different. Here it says, are not one and one, which supposedly is the Chinese way of saying not separate and different. Hearing, seeing, touching are not separate and different. Mountains and rivers are not seen in the mirror. The frosty sky, the setting moon at midnight. With whom will the serene waters of the lake reflect the shadows in the cold? It's a dialogue between the governor of the province and Nansen, who was asked by this same governor to teach, come down from his mountain where he'd lived for 30 years, growing his own food and being friends with woodcutters and peasants. Some people went up the mountain to talk to him. The governor invited him to take charge and teach in a monastery, which he did. And the governor himself in Nansen entered what is called a student-teacher relationship. And there are several dialogues that have been recorded and passed on that came out of this relationship. We'll read a few of those, and then in this case, taken from a book called Zen Dust, co-authored by Miura and Sasaki. The governor said to Nansen, in olden days there was a man who raised a goose in a bottle. As the goose grew bigger, it became impossible to get it out. Likewise, was it impossible for the goose to get out. Now the man did not want to break the bottle and did not want to hurt the goose. Your Reverence, says the governor to Nansen, Your Reverence, how would you get the goose out? Nansen called out, Governor. Yes, Liko responded. It's out, said Nansen. Says here, at this the governor attained some understanding. Let's stop and take some time with this particular story. It's a very good story. It's more than a story. A story of our life. Being raised in a glass bottle. Forget the goose. It's you and me that this koan is about. And all of a sudden, the realization, the bottle is too tight. One is in a prison. One is caught. It may be glass. One may be able to look through. Although glass does get scratched and dirty and smudgy, so the view may not be clear at all. How does one get out? Because for some reason or other one treasures the bottle. One is used to it. One's used to living in it, in cramped quarters. Where would I be without my bottle? The bottle, of course, here representing one's whole upbringing, one's whole education, conditioning, personal, interpersonal, social, economic, political, religious, the whole thing. One watches very carefully one's reactions and thoughts. Are they free? Philosophers tell us, or theologians, or we ourselves pride ourselves on our free choice, our free will. What is it? What's free about it? What we want, our desires, they're conditioned by what others want, what our parents want us to want, the values of the society, of the religion we belong to. All these are the conditioners of our free will, so-called free will. Sitting in a retreat such as this, people become painfully aware and frustratingly aware of the prison of their thoughts. I often say my own thoughts, but it's not your own thoughts. Who's the owner of the thoughts? That's another thought. The thought of ownership, mine. A whole bundle of thoughts, a clump. A lump. And these thoughts go round and round and round, on and on, back and forth. One has suffered in the immediate past, or in the distant past, some incredible hurts. One was wronged, or one has wronged, and it sits there in the brain like a powerful magnet, constantly attracting the thoughts to that event. And one goes over and over and over it. Either just to visualize it again, or to try to right the wrong. Because all kinds of emotions aroused, every thought arouses emotion and feeling. It is so, you can see it for yourself. Just one thought skipping through the mind like a flash, and there's an emotion, a feeling goes with it. If the feeling is pleasant, then more pleasant thoughts issue from it, which arouse more pleasant feelings, and it's a reinforcing thing. Or it's a terrifying thought, a frightening thought, and then frightening feelings and emotions are aroused in the body. And they arouse more frightful thoughts. What's going to happen to me? Am I getting sick? Or what's wrong with me? Is it going to get worse? Or else, yeah, I remember this, how horrible it was last time, and now I'm going to get into that again. And these very thoughts arouse more feelings in the body. It is so. The feelings arouse more thoughts, and so it goes on and on. The walls thicken. And then sitting in a retreat like this, or it may occur to one in one's daily life, it may hit one. Why do I have to live like this? Is this inevitable? caught up in this involuntary, is it involuntary? Prison? Actually, one comes to see it is not so involuntary, and it is not voluntary either, but somehow or other it's one's own creation. Because oneself isn't separate from one's parents and their parents and the people one interacts. They're made of the same stuff. The same thing happens there as happens here. We all do that to ourselves. Creating this solitary confinement, this glass bottle, whatever way you want to metaphorize it. Maybe the first thought is, who can save me from it? And then saviors are invented. Because if there were really saviors, gods or Buddhas who could get you out of that prison, they would have done it long ago. Wouldn't have waited on until today. Who can break the glass bottle? Who can crush it? Who can walk out of it but oneself? And that you don't know either, if it's possible. But if one really wants to know, you have no choice. You need to find out. Is this, I'm going to live for the rest of my life, confined in this wall of thoughts and reactions, conditioning? Isolation, confinement? Or is there a way out? There's no choice but to question this whole thing. Then is that still the bottle? Depends how you question. Are you really free to question? Free, meaning you're not tied to any idea, conviction, faith, belief in anything. Because if you are, you're not free to question. Your questioning is already influenced. It's tied someplace. And there are holy cows lurking here and there, which I better not touch. That's not free questioning, because the holy cows are part of the bottle. In questioning, there must be absolute freedom to question. Come what may. Question or attend, listen, look, whichever way you're working. But working freely. Not because of some authority figure says, do this, do that, follow this, give your life over to me. No, a person just visited me the other day who has entered into a teacher-student relationship with a teacher in another country. And I asked her about this relationship, what it meant. And she said it means giving yourself over wholly to the teacher, trusting that he will be reasonable. And she was very serious. She was not ironic in this. And she has this trust. So what's going to break the bottle? is the attachment to the bottle. And working here in a sesshin, in a retreat, one finds how precious one's thoughts are to one. They are one's blanket, security blanket. I don't have a radio here that you can switch on at night before going to sleep. Haven't yet set aside a room for TV. You never know. We have to yield to public demand. So what are you going to switch on? So there's not the scary emptiness of the mind. Of course, you may say, where is that scary emptiness? But one comes upon that in this questioning, in this attending. And it is scary. Then, thinking of this or that, is that radio or that TV turned on? It fulfills the same kind of function, occupying one. Even though the thoughts may be not very pleasant, but it is at least occupation with something. For fear of there being nothing, absolutely nothing. So, must be very clear about one's absence or one's attachment, absence of attachment or attachment to the bottle. Think with one train of thought, I want to be free, and with the other, create the security of enclosure, protection of a sort. A glass bottle is not much of a protection, but we think it is. We've been told it is. Everybody's in it. It's a common thing. And somehow or other one is attached. It's familiar. One thinks this is me, is part of me. My thoughts, my reactions, my feelings. Well, we're not talking about feelings as such. There's no prison about that. They're there. They come up. But the instant reaction, they're bad, they're good, I want to keep them, I want to get rid of them. That's the conditioning. And what arouses them is often the conditioning. Fear of this, anger at that. Can one attend, question, who, what, mu? Right into this attachment. This deep, deep-seated attachment. Either to this or to that, or to attachment. Hanging on to something. Or someone. And in questioning into attachment, you inevitably come upon fear, because there is no attachment without fear. And then that, what is it? No separation? Not was it going to get me into? You don't know. What are you in? You're in prison. Here in this story, Nansen just calls governor and he says, yes. He says, hey, you're out. Somehow or other, one doesn't know why or how or the cause of it, there was an understanding, a freedom from the bottle. Here's another story in which the governor said, in your disciple's house is a stone. Sometimes it sits, sometimes it lies down. Now I'm trying to carve it into a Buddha. Is it possible? Nansen said, possible. It's not impossible? Asked the governor. Impossible, impossible, replied Nansen. You see what's going on? The stone we know, the stone that sits or lies down, the numbness, the dullness, the murkiness, and then this desire to carve this into a Buddha or to attain a state of clarity, get enlightenment, be liberated, it doesn't matter in what words one puts it. And then the doubt, particularly of one has worked and worked and worked, so one thinks, for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, it doesn't matter. If one doesn't think of it in terms of time, it doesn't matter. But one does, and one compares. And then comes the doubt. What's happening? There's nothing happening. Nothing has changed. What am I doing this for? I'm still a stone. And you said I could become a Buddha. Well, I never said it. Become a Buddha meaning not becoming. It's not a question of becoming. It's a question, can the ice melt? The stone, the cold stone dissolve? So there's a free life flowing, with lots of feeling, no fear of either hurt or fear. Because most of the time fear isn't the problem, but the fear of the fear that freezes us up. Fear is just what it is. It's a pounding heart and a tight throat and aches all over. Feeling one has to go to the bathroom. Throw up. These are not pleasant feelings, but that's what it is. If one is with it, it's not that. It's just whatever it is, and it changes from moment to moment. When this vicious cycle isn't set into motion that we talked about in the beginning. The fearful thoughts about it which cause more nausea or more rumbling intestines. What is it? Right into it. And not constantly thinking, is it possible? Is it impossible? Nansen just said, yeah, impossible, possible, yeah. It's neither. There's no choice. You just do it. You question. You don't know. You don't know. Do you know what not knowing is? How can you? Not knowing is not knowing. And allowing this bottle to break on its own, or to dissolve, disappear, whichever way. Here's another one. Here's the last one. We read before we get back to the Koan, if we will, or else we'll take it up tomorrow. The governor was taking leave of the master to return to the government office at Senjo. Probably been there for a while, talking, sitting, whatever, meeting. And he says, and Nansen says, when you're there, back at your capital there, with what will you regulate the people? Or rule the people? I shall regulate them with wisdom. I shall rule them with wisdom, said the governor. If that's so, said Nansen, then every living soul will suffer great misery. With what will you rule the people? It's already a tricky question to ask. It's a trap. It's already appealing to all kinds of things in the ruler, in the governor, reminding him he's the ruler, that he has this power to regulate the people, and with what will you do it? And of course the governor, just coming here from retreat of Sesshin, lots of doksan, lots of reading probably, and maybe also thought, what does he expect me to say? May not have been so, we're just extemporizing it. And he says, of course, with wisdom. Because a good governor governs his people with wisdom. Can one rule people? Who are people? Who are the people? We're not talking right now of the particular job that was at hand, probably mostly collecting taxes. Maybe paying for an army. We're not concerned with the government job, but with this idea of ruling people. If it's an idea, and if it's the people out there that I, the governor, rule, with compassion, wisdom, and so forth. There is no wisdom and compassion unless there are no people out there. As long as there's me and those who are to be ruled, there is no soil, no ground for wisdom to grow, to come up. Maybe good ideas, or the show of compassion, institutionalizing it in some way or other. But there can only be compassion and wisdom, which are not two. Wisdom and compassion are not two. They cannot be. When there's no division. when there's no ruler and ruled, when the people are no other than oneself. And this is completely understood. It is not a fine sentence. This time, the governor comes to Nansen with a quotation which he's picked up from his reading. And he really loves it. It's beautiful. Probably glows with it, with the beauty of the words and the meaning, the depth of them. He says, "Heaven and earth and I are of the same root, all things and I are of one substance." And Nansen, probably, taking it from the way the Koan proceeds, sees that this is a quotation. The infatuation with a quotation with words. And it's so difficult, such a fine line to see whether one sees thoughts and speaks out of thoughts, or whether one really sees the meaning of the thoughts, not the meaning of the words, what they point at, and it's not the words. Must be so very careful in repeating words that they come out of seeing. Then it doesn't matter whose words they are, and they never belong to anybody. Or is one deceiving oneself? One thinks one understands, but it's still thinking. And that can be seen, can it? It must be constant close examination. So there is no self-deception and therefore no deceiving of others. So Nansen doesn't respond crudely. That's the beauty of a lot of these Chinese dialogues and the difficulty of them. It actually is a Chinese cultural conditioning never to be direct and blunt, always to sort of talk in roundabout ways. It makes it very difficult often to approach a koan because the whole cultural thing is in there too. There's this tremendous training in politeness, deference, reverence, saving face, one's own and that of one's visitor or guest. So the words have to be very carefully picked. I know whether Nansen carefully picked his words. I'm not saying that at all. What he did is he motioned the governor to come out into the garden, to step out into the garden, and he pointed to a flowering peony. Actually it says a flower, but I read in one of the commentaries that at that time in the monastery garden flowers were peonies, flowering bushes. 3 peonies, it was said, and they are beautiful. If you've ever seen one, they're incredible. 3 peony is a good word, enormous. And so much color in one flower, so much form in one blossom. And so full of life. So Nansen points to the flower, and he says to the governor, people of the world, or people of these days, people of these days, look at this flower as in a dream. In looking at a flower, there are no flowers right now. Here and there we have one in the house. There's one up in the meeting room. But it's not a matter of flowers. It's a matter of seeing. Can be a bunch of pebbles on the beach, a branch against the sky, a mountain, it doesn't matter. One person asking a Zen teacher, what is Buddha? He said, shit stick. How do you see it? As in a dream? A dream of sentimentality or revulsion? How does one look at something? Maybe there's the briefest of instant of a clear perception, and then immediately comes the word or the thought, what is this? And you scan your brain to find the word. A scanner, not you scan it, there's a scanner going on. And then you hit the right word, and all the while this is going on, this is where the attention is, and one doesn't see the flower. If one has found the name, there may be pleasure that one has found it, the name. Other things may go on in this dream, wanting to have it. Take it home. Photograph it. Not one person once said, you say so much about photographing. At that time I mentioned it often. I'm a photographer. Do you have something against photographers? There was a certain personal hurt in this, and it happens. All kinds of things are said in Teisho. Please don't take them personal. I don't mean you or you, I mean all of us, including me. Or if you're personally hit, look at it. Because there's something that may wake you up from the dream by looking. The dream of taking this uniqueness of oneself for granted and living it and nurturing it. That's the bottle. Something gets in between when one looks. What is it? Or is there already a judgment about oneself? I can't see it, I must be the hopeless case, other people can see except me. Or what is this seeing she talks about or he talks about? How can I get it? What can I do to really get there in this sesshin? And again, the mind is occupied. There's a film there. Nansen calls it a dream. Or else a beautiful quotation about a flower. I once took a mountain hike with someone who was just brimful of poetry, remembered poetry, no matter what we hit, whether it was a waterfall, a flower. Mountain or glacier, there was all this poetry. And she just didn't want to hurt the person and say, please, could you shut up for a moment? But we're now bicycling with earphones on. It's happening already. Bicycling, that must be dangerous. I wonder whether it's allowed by law. But people walking with earphones on, and what's in them? You know what's in them? There's music. I mean, there's something in there. It's just a new prison we've just invented. Now, somebody's going to take me to task over this. Here you're walking along the canal there, or bicycling along the canal, and you put this on there. Why do you do it? Well, the person who said, why don't you, would say, why don't you do it? And you'll see how beautiful it is. I want to hear music. I don't want anything else, nothing else. Not a good dinner with it. No, just music by itself. But it's for each one of you to do or not to do. Please don't say, Toni says, or I was going to say a few things about dreaming because it has come up from several people in this retreat that they've talked about the problem of sleepiness. Actually, with 2 or 3 of them, when questioned, they're referring to sleepiness during the informal sitting. That there's a sort of a battle going on with sleepiness and dreaminess. And one must always question why one sits, and we talked about it in the meeting. And some people say, I can't sleep. When I go to bed, I don't sleep anyways. I toss around. All right, then, to sit and to question a state of sleepiness. Not is it right or wrong, or is it nothing? Just what is it? What is it? And there be just that. No one else, nothing else, just that. And if it is not really a physical fatigue which cries out for some rest, because the body and the nervous system and the organs do need rest. It's a myth to think they don't. Somebody told me recently he participated in a Chinese retreat. And he said there the thing among the members, the participants, was who could outdo whom in the least sleeping and the most sitting. He said it was a real competitive thing going on. And people would constantly bang against the wall in front of them or fall down because they were sleeping. And yet there was a real, all around felt prestige of the least sleeper, the longest sitter. You know what we do? We create little bottles within big bottles. We're caught in it. So it can be enormously refreshing, regenerating, refurbishing to get sleep. Doesn't have to be long. It differs for different individuals here. There's a real difference. If one wakes up and it just has been this heavy dreaming, the head may be sort of buzzy, but it can go away very quickly if you don't make a thing out of it. It's the making a thing out of it which hangs on. You think, oh, I should not really have gone to sleep. If I had sat up, I wouldn't have this buzzy head. You may have a more buzzy head. You don't know. So find out, and don't go by what seasoned sitters do. Oh, I've told you. What you read. Can you put it all away? And sit and look and question right here and there, here and now. And find out for yourself. One dreams in bed, and one dreams on the cushion, and one dreams walking down the street. And not really any different dreams, any different state of mind. In bed at night, and maybe a little bit more unconscious stuff coming up. Because there's a little bit let up on the censoring, which happens in sitting too. That's why a lot of stuff breaks up from childhood or so. Because there's not this rigid censoring going on, which is inattention. If there's openness and attention, then stuff comes up. And if you look at it without any fear, no interpretation, nothing, just allow it to come up and see it, then it's not dreaming. Then it's seeing. And then can you be done with it, put it aside and go on, questioning or attending, not linger over something. Even though the lingering may be more pleasurable, but it's the bottle. Maybe we'll come back to the poem at another time because it's a good poem. And we'll end here for today.